Welcome everybody. All right, welcome everybody. Excited to be with you today and go through Exact Path. So I don't know. I'll pull the chat up here as well as we get going. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop any questions in there as we get going. I know we have a smaller group today, so I'm okay with questions coming through as well. If I'm moving through something and you want me to stop, can definitely do that. So I'll go through a little bit of background here and then we'll jump in. So Edmentum is the company that I'm with. You guys are using ExactPath and Courseware are two of the programs. So today we'll focus on ExactPath, which is really a diagnostic-driven direct instruction to accelerate student growth. And then you also use our courseware as a digital curriculum to help out with your adult learners as well. So my name's Andrew Capel. I'm your customer success manager, and I am right here in Minnesota. I'm in the Twin Cities, and you have direct access to me if you need it. My email address is right there. If you want to jot that down, it's andrew.capel@edmentum.com. My role is really to just make sure that you're supported and that you have what you need as you use both ExactPath and courseware with your adult learners. And so I've been with Edmentum about 2 years now. Prior to this, I was a principal down in Rochester of a middle school and alternative ed high school in Winona prior to that. So happy to be in the Twin Cities again, where I was born and raised, and working still impacting learners. So. All right, as we jump in, I do have a question for you just to ground myself so I know kind of the approach that we're taking today. Of where are you at with your Exact Path journey? If you wouldn't mind in the chat for me, just a red, yellow, green of where you're at. Red is maybe I've never touched it. I have no clue what it is, or I've heard of it, but haven't looked at it. Yellow, I've heard of it and I've logged in, but that's about it. And then green is I'm currently using it and I'm excited about it. I may not know everything still, but I'm in pretty good shape. Okay, perfect. To see some yellows coming through there. Excellent. Well, we'll today make sure that we cover everything you need to make sure that you have what you need to use with your students. And I like that line in the chat. So, and then we'll also look at some of the advanced pieces at the end as well, for those of you that are in that green category and you're ready to move to the next level. So thank you for that feedback. All right. So today's agenda, we're going to look at the objectives. We'll do an Exact Path overview, look at individualized learning paths, the student interface. Then I'll show you how to create a classroom on that teacher interface, some best practices, and then we'll do a brief overview of notifications and reporting for you. I do think we'll have some time at the end as well where I can jump into the assess and teach features, and that'll be a portion that's kind of that 102 after the introduction. So those of you that are in that green area, you'll definitely have some pieces there if you're not using that currently that you can take away. By the end of this initial session, the goal is that you're able to navigate the platform, create a class, describe the learning path, and then prepare and make sure that your students and learners are able to get into Exact Path. What is Exact Path? Exact Path is two things. It's a diagnostic assessment that your learners will take, and it will determine where their learning gaps are and what they need. From that determination, it creates an individualized learning path, and it helps accelerate their learning by targeting their specific needs. And that, in a nutshell, is what Exact Path is. So it does four things. And really, it's kind of a cyclical approach as we talk about the diagnostic windows and when those open and close within Minnesota literacy programs and the ABA programs that you serve. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to diagnose our learning needs by giving that diagnostic assessment and having them go through that and make sure that we're determining their needs appropriately. Second thing it's going to do is going to instruct. It's going to provide that instruction and those checks for understanding with automatic remediation. And that's all going to happen just within the program. These two are going to be with some input from you. So targeting unique learner needs, it's doing that through the learning path. But also when somebody's struggling over here, this is where the instructor comes in to really help target those needs, because the program needs a little bit that input from you. And then analyze the data and growth with the reports and usage in the program. So, all right, there's your background. So we're going to start with our diagnostic assessment. I mentioned that a little bit already. And for you, it's interesting because you are working with adult learners. So the recommendation would be, and we've gone over this in the past if you've been in the trainings, to set your students at the 12th grade level, so that they're getting a diagnostic that starts at that level, and then it will adapt down. To see where their gaps are, versus I know that in the past we've set it at different levels, like a 6th grade to 7th grade level, because we thought maybe that's where we should start. But that we would encourage you to start at the 12th grade. Make sure your students are set as 12th grade learners in the system, so they get that 12th grade diagnostic and it will adapt down. So once they get that diagnostic, it will determine their learning potential with those valid and reliable assessments. The exact path as itself as a program and the assessments have gone through rigorous research and are constantly being evaluated to make that better. Once a student completes that, they not only get their learning path, but they also receive a scale score. And those scale scores are updated and they're compared against national norms by testing periods. So spring, fall, and winter. So you can know that those are also updated and being assessed against the national norms. So for those of you that are not familiar with how a diagnostic assessment starts and works, this is a report that you'll get and you'll be able to see it. But a diagnostic assessment starts at grade level. And so we're going to target that 12th grade level. And then students get a series of questions. And as they get them right or wrong, the diagnostic is adapting to make sure that it's figuring out where those gaps are. So if they get the question wrong, they'll get something that's a little bit easier on that scale score or that scale or a grade level. Whether it's within the domain or band or in a new domain or band, until the system can kind of level out and figure out where is the student's strengths and weaknesses and where do they need some assessment or they need that additional help in that learning path, and it will create that. So you'll have access to a screen that looks like this, but it's not a series of 12th grade questions or a series of 11th grade questions. It really is adaptive to figure out where those learning gaps are. So, okay. There's the basic introduction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to log in and we're going to go ahead and just look at what do we need to do to get students prepared for this diagnostic assessment, whether they've taken it already, or as you come up on diagnostic window 2, how can we get them ready for that and what are some different settings within there. So we'll first go in, we'll create a class. I'll show you how to do that so that you can do that if you have not, and then we'll schedule the assessment. And preparing learners for that as well. So give me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and log in here. This is the right account. So when I log in, I'm going to go to ExactPath, and many of you will have the same deal on top because you have access to courseware, and I did that pretty fast. You may land on, and I'm going to show you something actually real quick. You're going to land on Edmentum Sensei. You have courseware there, flex assignments, and ExactPath because you have access to all of them. One thing you may consider doing is if you're using ExactPath or courseware is going to my profile here in Edmentum Sensei, and you can actually adjust where you land. So if you're logging in and you want to go directly to courseware, you can select that, or ExactPath, you can select that there as well. So if you're using one of the programs more than the other and you're not really using this Edmentum Sensei, feel free to adjust that so that it'll take you directly to where you want to go. So I'm going to click over to ExactPath. All right, first things first is we're going to create that classroom. So we'll land on this page here, your home page. What you're going to want to do is from this home tab, come over to manage classes. You may have classes here if you've already created one. I would encourage you, if you have classes that are not currently active that you're not using to select that box and archive those sections if it's an old classroom. And then create a new classroom if you haven't for this year already. So to create a class, I'm going to back up actually. Let me cancel out of here. If you have not created a class, the create a class button is going to be right here in the middle of where my classrooms are listed. If you have created a class, it'll be over here off to the right. So click on that. It will automatically add you as an instructor if you're an instructor in the system. If you're a program administrator in the system, you may need to add yourself. You can also add any other staff that you want as instructors. From there, you'll name your class. So we'll do a demo Minnesota Lit. And then you're going to want to select the school. This will be your ABE program. So make sure you select your ABE program. And then for the grade level, it doesn't matter as much because you can add students from multiple grades, but because we're using 12th grade as our threshold for ABE programs, you'll want to put 12 in there if you are picking something. Once there, you'll scroll down to student selection. It may be hidden. Just know there's a tab there if it is hidden that you can open that with. And then from here, you'll select your location again, your ABE program, and select your grade. So hopefully everybody's in 12th grade there. And then you can start putting those learners in as students if you want. So if you, let me see if I've got any here. So we've got a couple learners here. We would just add those students here. The ones that we want. I don't want the courseware demo student because we're in exact path, and we'd save it and we're good to go. Once that's created, you'll see that class show up here and it will show your created date as well. So you can track when that was created. All right. Any questions on creating a class? It's pretty straightforward. Just getting to that manage class tab is the biggest piece there. Excellent. Okay. Once your class is created, then you can schedule that diagnostic for students. To do that, what you will do is, and if you've already created a class, you can go right to the step. You don't need to go to the Manage Classes tab. On this black bar where we're under My Classes, you're either going to come over to Math or Reading. Yeah, how long does the diagnostic take? About 45 minutes is a typical time for adult learners. If they're over analyzing and thinking questions, it can take a bit longer, but typical time is about 40 to 45 minutes. All right, so I'm going to go to math since that's the first choice there. And they both look very similar. So I'll click over to reading so you can see there are those two pieces there. The first thing you'll want to do is schedule that diagnostic using the diagnostic scheduling tab. So we'll go ahead and click into there. Let's see, I'm in a test window here. I got to select my classroom by clicking here and search for a class. I will go ahead. Let's go to this class. I think I've got students in that one. So we've got students that are not scheduled, students that have lapsed schedule, and students that have completed here. So you can monitor completion. The nice thing about this too is if you and a counterpart both make a classroom in your ABE program, the data travels with the learner, not with the classroom. So if Winston Churchill takes the diagnostic for me and you were a counterpart in my program and you added Winston Churchill to your program, Winston Churchill would not need to retake that diagnostic because the data is attached to that student. So you can either select all. Oh, my testing window is closed. I need to adjust that. It looks like it closed on a couple days ago. But you would select these students and then you'd go in and you'd schedule it. And you know what? I'm going to do that real quick for you because I want you to see this. Just give me 1 second to just extend my, you know what? I'm going to extend the testing window real quick and so that you can see what it looks like to do that diagnostic scheduling. Exact path. I just needed to change over to an administrative account to update that testing window. Here we go. And we're just going to make it go till perfect. All right. So I'm going back to math, scheduling, and there's that same group of students. So we could select all if we wanted to. Once you're able to select them, it's as simple as clicking schedule, and you can schedule them one at a time or all of them together. And you can decide when you want that to open. If you want it to open today, close Monday, you can determine the time, but you do have to put a start and an end time in there. So I'm just going to go for a full 11 o'clock a.m. That'll be available, and it'll close at 11 o'clock a.m. there, and schedule. Once they've scheduled, they'll move over to schedule. If these students have not completed the test by the 30th at 11 a.m., they would move into this lapse schedule, and I could reschedule them according to the test window. So the other options that you'll have that you see under schedule is you can turn on audio controls. That's in addition to what's available there. It's up to you if you want to turn that on or not. It's typically in a K-12 setting used as an IEP accommodation or a 504 accommodation. So, and then the continue current learning path. If your learner has taken the diagnostic in testing window 1 and you just want the data, you want them to continue working in the current learning path, then toggle this on. And you'll get more information here if you click on these little information pieces as well. Okay. That is scheduling the diagnostic. And I see some questions coming in. So let's take care of the questions. And then that's it. So that's what you got to get to do to get the diagnostic scheduled, and then you're good to go. All right. So let me make this a little bigger so I can read it. So diagnostic take, we covered that one. Do we have the ability to determine testing window? Elizabeth, I see you answered that one as well. It is a statewide deal. We have to set at the program level. We can't set it individually by ABE program. So we can look at that and see. We have testing windows set for the full year, and it's on a 3-month basis. I can't remember off the top of my head what those exact dates are, but we can figure that out for you as well. Students don't have to test every testing window either. Unless you schedule that diagnostic, it's not going to show up for them. And as long as we have that set, and we'll double check those settings. Yep, you can absolutely test one student at a time. And then what is the toggle for students with an IEP? Audio control. So this is just going to going to allow it to be read to them. So the click to speak accommodation, it'll turn it on. So if you have I could definitely see that being used if somebody has some struggles with reading, or you want to make sure that you're not assessing their ability to read versus take the test, turning that on for students. Okay. Excellent. All right. So that is in a nutshell, scheduling that diagnostic. So the next thing that we're going to do is, here we go, drag that off. We're going to jump in. Now that the diagnostic's taken, it'll show up for students to take in their system when they log in. And then once they've completed it, we're going to begin the individualized learning path. So your learners are going to have the 6 to 12 grade learning path, this view here. This is more so for the K-12. There are different atmospheres for younger learners. This will come into play more so when we look at assess and teach. If you're assigning specific skills, you could assign this view as well. So what's in a learning path? So after that diagnostic, they get assigned the lowest skill that they need help with first, so that we can build up to where they need to be as far as those standards go. From K-12 standards, bring them all the way up to grade level. They get a lesson first within that skill. So that's that direct instruction, the new information or the presentation, the teaching on that skill. After they've had the chance to learn about that skill, they get practice. And this is going to ask them to interact more with the content and to jump in and see what that looks like. Their feel is going to be very similar to courseware. So a very comparable feel, something they're used to, but it's going to be prescribed one skill at a time that they need to work on. After they've practiced that skill, they'll then get a progress check. That progress check is really, did you get it or did you not? It's a formative check. It's 5 questions. and they need to hit 4 out of 5 correct to move forward. If they hit 4 out of 5, they're good to go. If they don't, then there's some automatic remediation that's built in. So how is mastery determined? It's that 4 out of 5 on that progress check. And then if they don't, there's that remediation I mentioned. I'm going to take you through a series of infographics that kind of demonstrate this for us as well. So we'll start with our original skill. So after that learning, or the learning path is in, they go to skill 1. They hit that lesson, the practice, and the progress check. If they hit 80% or more on that progress check, they earn a trophy and they move forward to the next skill in their learning path. If they hit less than 80%, then they'll have a retake of that original skill for a second chance at learning. And that retake may be, if they're really close, it might be the same content, just a refresher. If they weren't as close, it may be a retake with an alternate lesson on the same skill. So if they hit that retake and they score 80%, they're done. They move on because they've mastered that skill. They hit less than 80%, they may be assigned a building block. I see that question came in. If they hit 80% but want 100, can they retake it? Technically, no, but you could go back with them and review them with them individually in a one-on-one conference. I'll show you how to access that information. We'll get to the teacher side too. So if they retake and they don't hit 80% though on that retake, they get what's called a building block. And that is really just a prerequisite skill that's designed to help them get the information they need to move back to that original skill and be successful. So they can and also earn a second retake with alternate lesson if their content is available. So on that building block, if they hit 80%, they go back to that original skill, and then hopefully they hit 80% at that point and can move forward. Now, what happens if they're not successful on that first building block? They could get a retake, or they could be assigned a second building block if they're not successful. So the system will not continually push students back though. So that second building block, they may get a retake on that as well. But if they're not successful, if they're successful, they move back to the first building block, hopefully successful back to that skill, and then test out of it. But if they're not successful at that point with the second building block, the system will stop it. A red X will appear on your side, not on the learner's side, and it will not allow the student to move forward on that progress skill. What it looks like on their end is they're just going into the next skill. But it's changing the skill designed to help it keep that intrinsic motivation moving forward. And this is designed for you to then intervene and say, okay, there's a skill where there's a gap and the system's not getting it. It will provide you with some resources as well to go help remediate that skill with the student. All right, so when you log in after your students are using, you're going to see this teacher dashboard. And I left this screenshot in here because I don't have as good of a screenshot. It's going to give you a sortable piece that says needs attention, may need support, and deserves recognition. And it's going to have some different pieces here. So you're going to have those not mastered X's, skill missed, recommending for review. Under those may need support, you're going to start to see your building block students, and then deserves recognition are going to be your trophies. So, and it's also going to outline which resource they're looking at. So, okay. I mentioned this different student interfaces earlier. There's a kind of a peek at them. The 612 may look like this in some spots, but it's also going to look like courseware in other spots. So, all right, I'm going to go in to the student view so that you can see what that looks like. So give me 1 second here. I'm going to log out and find a student view for you. So this is going to be the secondary interface. So what your students see. You can see from this portion right here, if you're familiar with courseware, that it looks almost identical. And actually, if the student had courseware classes assigned to them as well, a tile would show up and it would have then the courseware title next to it. So it lives in the exact same place on the student interface. They just get that different tile. So the math learning path, there's our lesson, our practice. There's some additional practice and a progress check there. So I'm going to just go in and show you what it looks like. Those of you familiar with courseware, you'll see. This
we should put up a
more the animated version.
Yes, we'll but how do we measure length?
So if they're in the animated
cards down end to end along the. I see what you're.
I'm going to move through that.
It takes 7 centimeter cubes to reach from one end of the card to the other.
Explaining the skills.
Is 7 centimeters long.
And it's
nice work. Now let's go get that curtain.
And it's just provided the overview of the lesson. So I'm going to go to learning path. This one's done. Now we're going to move into practice. You'll see I have those locked until I get there.
You can measure the length of an object using
this is just a recap.
Measure length using cards. Use the number selector to enter your answer. How many cards long is the door?
And then it's going to ask us to start practicing the skill that we just learned. So how many cards long is the door? We're just going to go, okay.
Not quite.
Count the cards get some
to
feedback.
Find the length in cards.
So then there we go. We're going to go.
Great. The door is.
You'll notice as students are working through the questions up here and the score. If they get the answer correct the first time, they get 1 point. The second time, they get 0.5 points. So there's that piece. I'm not going to move through this full piece for you, but just so that you can see that feedback a couple times.
Not quite. Count the cards to find the length in cards.
And I apologize because I was hoping this was more of that courseware view that you'll probably see more of, but this specific student.
Using paper clips. Use the number selector to
this specific student is working at a lower scale, and so they're not necessarily going to get the same content because it is turned on to a little bit lower scale. So I apologize for that. All right, that progress check, I'm locked out of it right now, but the progress check is pretty simple. It's black and white. It's not fancy looking like the practice. It asks a multiple choice question, select all that apply, select the sentence out of a reading structure, drag and drop, find the point on a graph for some of the math. There's a number of different types of assessment questions, the 5 questions there. It does provide the feedback in the sense that it gives them the number they got correct at the end, but it does not provide that correct answer if they do get a question wrong within the progress check. Like I said, I'll show you how to get to that on the teacher side so that you can see how they answered and review different pieces with them if need be. So, all right, I'm going to pause there and take a look at the questions that are popping up again in the chat. If you have any questions, now is a good time to ask those as well around the student side. So what audience is exact path for? I see Elizabeth, you jumped in there. Yeah, difference between exact path and courseware. Courseware is going to provide those full courses that are more like a high school full course, where exact path is more skill based. And so if you're really trying to identify gaps for students, exact path, the diagnostic specifically is going to show you where those gaps exist within a student's learning. So if there's just 1 or 2 skills that they may need from like an 8th grade level, it can identify that versus where they're moving through a full course, there's not a diagnostic assessment to get that data for them. And then this is just giving specific skills at the grade level versus the entirety of that content. So very different uses in different cases. I would say in conjunction, they could be used together depending on the situation. And yeah, I see some answers there from Elizabeth too. So, but that's the high level overview piece there. Any other questions before I jump back out of here? Okay.
Yeah, Andrew, one complaint I've heard about Exact Path is that those diagnostic assessments are so long. especially when you have new students who like they already had to take a really long TABE test. Is there
Yeah.
any way to make it give a shorter version?
There's not a shorter version of the diagnostic, but it can be taken in multiple sittings. So if you want to break that up, and realistically, what I would coach you to talk through with your learners about is that it's a you don't have to get everything right. So if there's a question that's stumping you, um, do your best on it, but don't spend so much time on it that you're going, I got to figure this out. I got to learn a new skill to try to take that question. It really is designed to move through in about like that 45-minute realm so that students aren't spending too much time on it. So it's more a show what you know than you're not going to get a final test score. Is a good way to explain it, especially with adult learners. So, but yes, no, there's not a way to shorten the diagnostic, unfortunately.
Could you just assign them some activities and then see what happens?
You can. So I'm going to show
You know,
that.
if you had your TABE score or whatever score and then say, oh, I think that kind of aligns with this spot and then working from there.
Yeah. So the nice thing about exact path too is there's two options. There's the learning path. Um, and I'm going to jump in and I'm going to go back into the teacher view for you so you can see that, and then we'll talk through it right there. All right. So yeah, there are two portions of exact path. The first is the diagnostic that's specific to students and their learning path. And so you'll see there's a student that did a progress check and is good to go on that one. Once kids have taken that diagnostic or your learners, sorry, they're not kids, and they're in their learning path, you can either click into math or reading, and they're the same. There's both these current activities in a knowledge map there. And what you'll want to do is click into one of them. They're both good for different pieces. I need to go to a different classroom here. Let's go this one. Got more students there. It's going to show you a list of what they're currently working on. So you can see if there's similar things that are being worked on. It's going to show you what they previously worked on and what's to come next. This is an all-in-one spot. The piece that might be more beneficial for you, and I like this one better, is the knowledge map. So I'm just going to click this tab over. You can also get to it by clicking math or reading and clicking in the knowledge map. This is going to show you the results of that diagnostic, and you'll see placed above is teacher placing, and then assessed above are these green ones. These are where students are assessing based on that diagnostic. It's giving me, I'm looking at 4th grade here all the way up to whatever grade span. I've got a student working in 10th grade as well, and I would expect this is similar to what you're going to see with your learners, is a wide variety of differences in what they need to work on. But you can see I've got students that assessed and need to work on skills down here in 4th and 5th grade, and others that are up here in the 10th grade, 9th, 10th grade skills. So it really is designed to fill those gaps so that they can be more successful in those courses once you're using courseware with them, or maybe there's a prerequisite skill and you can see then within that diagnostic. I'm going to go back to a student here that has some gaps. Like here, this student, we might want to go back and look in converting measurements and representing and interpreting fractional data on line plots. So really that measurement piece back here is maybe a skill that's holding them back from accelerating at a 10th grade level or on 10th grade content that you would need to know. The other thing that might be really helpful to know in thinking about those TABE results, because you have multiple data points, is this K-12 learning progression report is available within the knowledge map, and it will show you the progression, and I'll just click on it so you can see it in both reading and math, and how these skills go in what order. So if you're thinking about, placing a student on a learning path in a different place than maybe what the diagnostic showed, you can come in here and you can look at the skill progression and see what order these skills are going to go in. So it might be a nice place to cross-reference and look at some of those scores on the different, both the diagnostic and the and your TABE results. Okay, I'm gonna click in then after this, and this is like I said, a nice data point. The other piece I want to show you here, and let me get there. I'm gonna just click over to a different class.
Can I just ask one more question with that? If I started them with a current activity or the knowledge path, once they completed that activity correctly, got their 80%, would it still guide them to the next one, or or do I
Yes.
have to do everything manually for them from now on?
Nope, with the diagnostic and the learning path, you'll see like this student, Power Ranger, has completed these two and it's just continuing to move forward and onto the next skill, onto the next skill.
Okay.
I think these ones are at grade level right now, but if there was holes in this, and so there was one blank here and one blank here, the learning path automatically is moving them forward. So there's always more and more skills for them to learn.
All right, thank you.
Yep, you bet. So if and this is going to come back to that question where, you know, let's click on this skill. You can click on these skills that students have worked on in either the current activities or knowledge map, and you get a tray that pops up. And this is a bad example. Let me to answer your question anyways, this bad example. So you can go in and you can review that skill and you can see their answers and how they answered on that progress check. You can actually turn their answers on or the correct answers on and off as well. So if you wanted to, if a student hit 80% and they wanted to go answer that one question, you wanted to review it with them, you could do that by pulling this up. The other thing that's available here is you have some, let me get out of this one. So you have some different resources that are available as well. So if you had a struggling student and you wanted to provide some additional practice, you could look at these and preview them. There's a lesson practice master quiz. You could assign that from here directly to that student so that they were good to go. And this would pop up as an assignment, similar to like a flex assignment, if you're familiar with that within the courseware piece. There's also some different worksheets and printables that you could pull off that are around that skill. So another great resource for you as you think about where your kids are at and what they need. Okay. The other portion of exact path that I do want to highlight, especially since some of the questions have come up, and this is not typically, this is what I was going to add at the end, but I think we're okay on time, is looking at assess and teach. Assess and teach is similar to like your flex assignments in courseware, where you can assign a skill that's just one skill. And Jason, this is going to answer your question slightly, is do I have to assign another thing? In the learning path, no. But if you're in the assess and teach features, you can come in here and under priority skill lessons, there are by standard or by skill that you can select by grade level and pinpoint specific things. So if you are saying, you know what, I don't want them working in the learning path, but I do want them working on some of the data pieces that I garnered from that diagnostic or from my TABE diagnostic, you can come in here and search by skill, and then you can see the different content. In here, one thing to be aware of is it does highlight which learning style the lessons are in. So your 612 is that more courseware feel, that K5 is more of that the animated feel that we looked at in the learning path of the student. But you can preview these lessons, and if it's something you do want to assign based on that data, again, you can just assign it from right here. Go in here, find your student, select them, and assign that out, set a due date for them as well. And then you would be able to see that information too, once they complete that. So the other option that you have within assess and teach, these priority skill lessons include both the instruction and the assessment of the instruction. Are these standards mastery? These are just an assessment. There's no learning that or instruction that's paired with them. They're available for standards from grade 3 through 8. And so if you were really looking into like an 8th grade standard and you wanted to assess a student on square and cube roots, this will provide them a 10 question set around that standard so you can get an idea of where their proficiency is on that standard. So that's a really nice third data point per se, if you're using both the diagnostic and the TABE data to look at. But this is, again, these standards mastery are simply just the assessment portion, where your skill lessons are actually the lessons in the instruction. To see the results on either of these, it's back under my classes and assignments. And then you would just, you'd be able to see, oh, I don't have any in that class. I gotta change to the right class. And I think it's this one right here that I have some past work on. So you can see both the priority skill and the standards mastery are there, and how many students have completed it, as well as you can click in and see individual scores on that as well. Some different features. Again, those are kind of the next level features though, but they're there for you to use. So I would encourage you to use them. Maybe we can, that's something Elizabeth and I will talk about further, exploring at some point too, how to really use those along with the other piece. So, all right, let me do that. Last thing I'm going to show you before we jump out of here and take questions is the Help Center. If you're familiar with courseware as well, the Help Center is really great. Actually, the Exact Path Help Center I like a little better. Even if you click on Help, Learn and Support Exact Path, there's some really great tiles at the beginning of it to help you navigate where you need to go. But it is the entire thing is searchable here as well. So if you know the keyword you're looking for, just search for it. But the begin here section is great. And then there's some additional too, and assessment solutions. So begin here and assessment solutions be the two that I look at, but there's some 2-minute overviews if you want to provide some information for your learners about what Exact Path looks like, or just kind of getting to know those pieces, as well as those guides for you. They're all right there. So please access that if need be. That's just a Help Center, Learn and Support right here. Okay. All right. Covered that teacher side, and we kind of went off into that assess and teach a little bit, but for the most part, math and reading, current events, knowledge map, figure out your preference on what you want there, to look at and monitor progress within the learning path. But both have great features and they're clickable to see exactly what your students are looking at. All right, any questions before I jump out of here? Excellent. I'm going to jump back over here then. So we're thinking about some best practices within Exact Path, and thinking about that skill assignment versus course assignment. I mentioned this already for our upper grade level students. I know this is K5, 6, 8, but really 40 to 60 minutes is what our research is saying, and most of the research is done around K12, is showing that if students are spending 40 to 60 minutes per subject per week in the learning path, they are making gains on standardized assessment, specifically the NWEA MAP assessment, which correlates to many state assessments. All right. So again, just a quick review, monitoring progress and using that knowledge map to do so. That K-12 learning progression report might be a really nice report for you to look at skills and help identify if you want to assign any of those. And then clicking on those individual pieces that students have done to see what they've done and completed, and different resources that are available for you. So, and current activities, another way to look at it. On the current activities page, these are also clickable. The current skill and previous skill is. The next skill is not. A student has to be working in that for it to be accessible for you to see the resources and what they've been working on. So, all right. The data reporting with Exact Path, because you do need to report those clock hours. I know Elizabeth's on here, so correct me if I'm going down the wrong way, but we've talked about the learning path progress report being one that you'll want to use. And then if you're a program administrator, the admin center, you can pull that contact hour report by student. So to get to reports, similar to your math and reading, if you click over to reports here, you'll have these 3 different reports that you can access. The learning path progress report is the one that we like, and you can preview that if you want to see it prior to pulling it. And I'll just preview it so you can see it rather than pulling it out. It'll give you the name of the learner, grade their time in the learning path, unique skills assessed, trophies earned based on those, and then total time in system. So total time in learning path is not going to include if you're assigning the assignments. So you might want to then use your total time in system, but that will also include your coursework time. So just be cognizant of that as well. I'm not logged in as a program administrator right now or an administrator in the account, but those of you that are, you have the admin center. You would just go into your admin center reports and you can run that report there. All right. There's a quick reference handout for ExactPath that was created for your team. Elizabeth's already on it. Got it in the chat there for you. And it's available if you, I'll leave that there for just a second, but it's also in the chat if you want to click on that and specifics for ExactPath with M and ABE. As we wrap up here, I just want to reiterate that Help Center is fantastic. That first icon, that learn and support ExactPath, is really where I would point you to, but there are other great resources there too. But that's what's going to have your begin here and all of your user manuals and different tools to help you. So if you do need some support or you have some questions that come up after this, you're going, hey, I'd really like to talk through this with somebody. It's not necessarily a support issue. Feel free to reach out to me. My email address is right here on the bottom of the screen. Andrew.capel@edmentum.com. I'd be happy to talk through different scenarios that you have. Or if you're wondering, hey, when would be appropriate to use ExactPath versus courseware? We can definitely talk through some of those pieces as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here to work with you and to support you. So that is that piece. The last thing that I have for you before we take some questions is we do ask for some feedback in our when we present and do these PD sessions. I think it's a 4-question thumbs up, thumbs down deal. I popped that link in the chat for you as well. If you wouldn't mind taking that while we finish up the last part here with Q&A. And before we do, while you're doing that survey, the one thing I do like to ask that you do as we walk away from any session that we're talking about something new, and it's a lot of information up front. It's the goals of really making sure that you kind of have the basics and understand it so that you can launch that diagnostic and get working with your students. You'll be able to monitor the data in the current activities and knowledge map much better when it's actually your students and the data is meaningful to you. But I do want you to just reflect for a minute and think about what is one thing that I'm either still wondering or one thing I want to implement with my adult learners here in the next 2 weeks, just so you have something tangible to walk away from this training with. Okay. And with that, I am done with my portion, but I'd love to take any questions that you have. I know we're wrapping up a little bit sooner than was planned, but that's okay because I want to make time for you to ask the questions that you have. So, any questions?
Andrew, I know in the past we had talked about certain situations where you want learners to just continue on their learning path. But for some reason it was necessary to assign the diagnostic assessment for a very short time, and then learners would just miss that time to continue. Can you talk more about that?
Absolutely. Sorry, my voice is breaking up a little bit here. So when we went into to schedule that diagnostic, either under math or reading, under that diagnostic scheduling, when we schedule that student, give me 1 second. I'm going to go to the classroom that we were working in because we have a bunch scheduled. Just got to find that right class. I think it's this one. Here we go. We've got 7 scheduled. You have that ability. You're there to continue current learning path. We've seen situations where you just want that diagnostic data and you don't want that learning path to change because you feel like they're on the right track, they're moving through it well, and they're at the right place, but you need a data point. Go ahead and schedule that diagnostic, but continue them on the learning path so it's not interrupting or changing their changing their path. They will finish up the skill if they're in the middle of working on a skill, but the next skill will then change to a new learning path if you don't toggle this. But if you do, they'll just keep going and you'll have a data point there. The other thing to know, and I know this question's come up with different ABE programs, is we have an academic year that is, you'll see it up here, and we have to define that. And so within there are 4 testing windows for MN ABE programs. When we switch from like 23, 24 to 20, I'm missing a year in there, but to 24, 25 or 25, 26, the learning path will not carry over between academic years. So you do have to do a diagnostic assessment at the beginning of a new academic year every year, and there's not a way to carry that over. So do be aware of that. I think that ends, I want to say it was July 31st to August 1st, but we'll double check that. Elizabeth, I don't know if you remember off the top of your head when that switches over for MNABE, but we can double check that. So, but yeah, that's a really nice piece, especially if you're feeling good momentum, but you need a data point. Please click that on so that you can use that.
And so if I don't want to have my learners sit through another 45-minute assessment, that's when I do the thing where I schedule their assessment for like 2 minutes on a weekend so that they miss it.
Yes, you can also schedule it for that weekend. So if you want to reschedule that, you could always put it on a Sunday, I think we did. And you can schedule it to start at 11 a.m. or 11. And we scheduled it and then we closed it at 11:01. So if you want to just make sure that they all move into that lapse piece, you'll be able to lapse them that way and then they're fine. Otherwise, you can just not schedule them too. That's an okay piece. All right. Any other questions?
And I'm sorry, hi, this is Julie. And so then to not schedule them, we're just going to toggle that on. Am I understanding that correctly or not?
When your new testing window rolls up, automatically all of your students are going to be not scheduled. So if you do schedule them and you want it to be really short open and close, you can schedule for a 1-minute window on a Sunday. Or if you want them to take the assessment, but you don't want their learning path to change because maybe testing window 1, they took the assessment and it created a wonderful learning path you want them to continue on, but you want the data for testing window 2, then you would just toggle this on and their learning path won't change, but you would still get the diagnostic data from that assessment.
Okay, I think I got it. Thanks.
No, that sounds good. Yes, thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'll hang out here if you do have any questions. Otherwise, that's what we have for you today. We'll look at some 102 per se sessions in the near future as well. I know Elizabeth is working on some great feedback from you and your teams of what you need around these programs, and we'll make sure that happens specifically as far as those next step or next level programming. So thank you, everyone. We'll hang out here though if you have questions.